Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge, and welcome to Keeping Relevant. Les Leopold is the executive director of the Labor Institute and author of books and articles about economic inequality. What I especially love about my guest is his sense of fairness, his outrage at the lack of it, and his efforts to find it. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's a pleasure. So tell us about the Labor Institute, because that's sort of like does the field work for the books and articles that you author.
Absolutely. I'm a very lucky guy. We formed the Labor Institute 47 years ago, and our goal was to design political economy education programs for trade unions and community groups. And now we work with several trade unions, and we work with immigrant worker centers as well. And we kind of produce the education that you see behind the UAW's effort during this last strike, their sense of taking on inequality. So I'm very lucky in that I get a chance to work with groups around the country, and I get a chance to write about it.
So are you both an economist and a politician?
No, I'm neither a political scientist nor an economist. I'm right in between.
Okay.
Political economy is sort of a field between political science and economics. And I'm really a public educator. When I'm feeling more pretentious, I would call myself a public intellectual. But really what I do is I do a lot of collating and translating so that everyday working people can get a better grasp of what's going on in the world around them.
So do you extend to working people that are not in unions?
Yes.
Do you get them more interested in unions?
We hope so. Some of our work just goes out far and wide. When we did our work around runaway inequality, we had people come to us from all over the country. Most of them were not in unions. And we hope that we contributed some to the rising concern about runaway inequality, and hopefully contributed some to people feeling positive about trade unions.
You're quite dramatic in your titles. I love them.
Got to sell books, you know.
The looting of America.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, the publishers are usually have the final word on titles, and they want people to pick up the books.
Right.
And it's, writing books is a tricky thing, because how do you know that you're going to have any impact at all? Well, you only have impact if a lot of people read it. So you have to do the nitty-gritty work of getting it out, and it starts with having a good book and a good title.
Right. So you have this constituency that you work with, and then you train people to go out and talk about what you've written in the book.
One of the things that we developed over the years was a non-lecture training technique so that workers themselves could become trainers. So we trained a huge number of people to do that around occupational safety and health. But after Occupy Wall Street and around the Sanders campaign, when we started the runaway inequality education, we created a curriculum, and we trained about 100, 200 workers to run these classes all over the country.
I love it.
And the Communications Workers of America is still doing it. They have about 50 of these trainers that conduct 8-hour classes around runaway inequality. It's a pebble in a pond, but hopefully the ripples go out.
And you've got a website.
We have a website. I have a Substack.
Yeah.
Les Leopold.
And I think Runaway Economy has its own website.
Right. Runaway Inequality has its own website. We try to keep it up to date. And the curriculum's on there in Spanish and in English. People can take it for free.
So great.
Our programs really are there for people to use.
So can you tell me how important the auto workers
Hugely
strike?
important for a couple of reasons. One, it dramatically spoke to inequality throughout the country. It showed the kind of unabashed greed that the executives of GM had over the years, rewarding themselves, while the workers basically had their wages frozen for at least a dozen
What's the
years.
ratio between their pay or their income or something?
It's got to be, several hundred to one. It's funny, I didn't calculate it. Overall, the top 500 CEOs, executives, it's 800 to one overall. And you know what's interesting? I just did this again. If you ask people, Democrats and Republicans, what they think the ratio should be, it's somewhere between 5 and 12 to 1. So there's a huge sense of injustice that's out there. It needs to be organized. And the UAW tapped into it, I thought, beautifully. Sean Fain, the president, really articulated the general problem of inequality. He says, we're going to do something about it, and then we're going to reach out to the rest of the country and try to organize them as well. Very inspiring.
So they really had a victory. I mean,
huge victory.
Did they have an impact? I know that there was talk about it. Did they have an impact on future strikes?
They achieved something that I don't know any other union in modern days has achieved, which is during their contract, they now have the right to strike if GM, any of the big three auto companies, shut down a facility. And so they actually have the right to strike over a mass layoff. I don't know any other union that has contractual power to do that. And what that will do is it will make a company think twice before it lays off a lot of people.
So that brings us to the subject of your new book that's coming out in February.
Correct. Wall Street's War on Workers. And it actually grew out of...
But that's not the whole title.
No, it's how mass layoffs and greed are destroying the working class and what we can do about it. We stumbled into a database on mass layoffs that ran from 1996 to 2012, and then the Obama administration stopped it for austerity reasons or whatever. And we saw that 20 million workers had gone through a mass layoff, defined as 50 or more people laid off at the same time. 20 million. And if you project that forward, it's 30 million. And we said, wow, that's an enormous number of people. What's the impact on politics? And then we made some discoveries that blew our minds, and we hope will blow the minds of readers.
You described the whole reason why the Democratic Party is having so much trouble losing. The Obama administration stopped the registry, not the mass layoff.
No, they didn't stop the mass layoffs.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. They stopped the collection of that database at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, unfortunately, because it was really
astonishing.
Something. Yeah. So here's how I'd like to introduce you to the story. Let's start with Mother Jones. Mother Jones is known for, one of the things she's known for is the support work she did with coal miners in Mingo County, West Virginia. There was the coal wars. There were these gigantic battles all in the early part of the 20th century. And Pinkerton, guards were brought in, shot workers. Eventually, the federal troops came in. It was illegal to be in a union. The mine workers were crushed. And this went on until the New Deal, when finally unions were legalized and the mine workers started to grow. Mingo County, in the heart of coal country, rewarded the Democrats tremendously. In 1996, Bill Clinton got 69.7% of the vote in Mingo County. Guess what Biden got in 2020? 13.7%.
I was going to say 20.
It went from, it dropped every 4 years. It dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. So what happened? Well, in 1996, Mingo County had 3,300 coal jobs. In 2020, it had 300 coal jobs. In a county of 24,000, 3,000, not 24,000 workers, 24,000 people, 3,000 coal jobs disappeared. Now you can imagine the devastation. So during this time, the Democrats held presidential power for 16 of the 24 years. So what did they do for Mingo County? Everybody knew those jobs were going to disappear because we were weaning ourselves off of fossil fuel, especially coal, and nothing was done. Correction, something was done. The free market was allowed to work its magic in Mingo County. And labor was cheap, land was cheap, so new industries could blossom. That's what's supposed to happen under capitalism. So what happened? A new industry came in, Can you take a guess at what it was?
No? What?
Opioids.
Oh.
It became the prescription pill mill for the whole 5-state area.
Oh my God.
The pharmacies in Mingo County produced more than one opioid prescription per minute. One of the drugstores there produced more opioid prescriptions. It was number 22 in the entire country. The poverty rate in Mingo County today is like 29%. So the Democrats neglected them. So we then said, is it just Mingo County? Well, we then investigated, this is, the story continues. We then investigated the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And we looked at the counties, and we had the data of mass layoffs by county. And we found that as the percentage of mass layoffs went up, the Democratic vote went down. And it was statistically solid, rock solid, and no other cause could touch this in explaining why these states that were so solidly Democratic became, basically purple, right? Every presidential election now hinges on what happens in those three states. So then we took the next dive, and this was the scary dive. Well, what if there is another explanation? Maybe people just got, the white working class people, like in Mingo County, just became more racist over time, more sexist, more homophobic, more xenophobic. Mm-hmm. So it turns out there are 3 very rich databases with tens of thousands of voter survey results that we could analyze over the same period of time. And we found something that was absolutely astounding. The white working class actually got more progressive, not more liberal. The percentage of white workers who wanted to legalize immigrants that were already here jumped from 30 to 66%. The number of white working class people who believe that gay couples should be able to adopt went from 30% to 70%. Support for abortion went up. Support for women's rights went up. It was absolutely phenomenal. So this attack on the white working class, blaming them as
deplorables.
Deplorables, exactly right, was wrong. Are they as liberal as managers? Not quite, but the managers basically have the same profile. The country has gotten more progressive. That's not what's going on now. We are arguing in this book that the number one reason that workers have abandoned the Democratic Party and looking elsewhere is mass layoffs. Mass layoffs are the most destructive thing that can happen to a person. I mean, the literature about the kind of illnesses and disease that follows when people lose their jobs is phenomenal. We asked a group of steelworkers that we work closely with the Steelworkers Union on occupational safety and health. And before one of the classes, we did a little survey. We asked people, had they gone through a mass layoff? Well, nearly every one of them had, and several of them had gone through more than one. And people started saying, I used to be a Democrat, and I can't stand them anymore. They let my plant shut down. They didn't come in and help us. And then lo and behold, who did? Well, Donald Trump made a big deal over the carrier corporations. Indiana moved to Mexico, and he intervened and he stopped that plant from moving to Mexico. And you know what? A lot of workers looked at that and said, about time.
And his talk, is that connected with anti-China talk? And
there's plenty of anti-China talk, but it's from a jobs perspective. It's like saying, why are you exporting my job? And leaving nothing behind. Let's go back to Mingo County. There is so much that could be done in Appalachia. The whole infrastructure needs to be rebuilt. There's a huge environmental possibilities there, not just for solar and wind, but to reclamation, to protect the streams, the forests from what's happened with coal mining. And the people there are very environmentally oriented. They love their streams and forests. They hike, they fish, they hunt. And it would be so easy to do a kind of New Deal type plan for Appalachia, for West Virginia. It's just sitting right there, and we don't do it. We let the free market come in and do a pill mill and help addict people to opioids. By the way, West Virginia has the highest death rate from opioids in the whole country. This kind of big picture thinking just went out the window. And I know the Biden administration believes that their infrastructure bill is addressing it, and it will help. But the amount of destruction in rural America that's taken place from plant closing is enormous. And you have to dive right in and create jobs.
So now let's talk about why we get the the mass layoffs.
You're following right along here.
Because we're come to Wall Street,
Yes,
right?
Here's the connection to Wall Street. Before the deregulation of Wall Street, it starts with Reagan, and then Clinton does them one better. And the Democrats and the Republicans start competing for who's going to deregulate Wall Street the most. And one of the things they deregulated was stock buybacks. And stock buybacks are a very interesting thing. It's a form of stock manipulation. The company uses its money, its profits, to go out in the market and buy back its own shares, make them disappear. And the price of all the shares go up because you're reducing the number, and you have to bid up the price to get people to sell it to
But
you.
it doesn't eliminate the shares, it gives it to the company.
No, it basically eliminates, puts it in the company's vault.
Okay.
They're not out there anymore. So each share is a little more valuable. Each share owns a little bit more of the company, right? Well, before 1982, only 2% of corporate profits could go to stock buybacks. 2%. Very modest amount, because they saw this was a form of stock manipulation, the kind of manipulation that caused the 1929 crash. So they didn't permit it. They deregulated. Today, it's nearly 70%. 70 cents out of every dollar of corporate profits goes to stock buybacks. It's almost possible to say that the business of America is to produce money to do stock buybacks. Why? Because about 85% of corporate CEO income comes from stock incentives. So if you can raise the price of the stock, you enrich the CEOs. But even more importantly, Wall Street was free to take positions in these companies, try to get on the boards, pressure the boards to do stock buybacks. And then they're not investors, they're stock sellers. They take a position, the stock price goes up, and bam, they sell. So how do you pay for this? Well, you pay for this through mass layoffs. And the other form of this are leveraged buyouts, where Wall Street engineers the buyout of a company using borrowed money. You place the borrowed money on the company that you bought. This is what happened with Toys R Us. Then the company struggles to pay back the debt. How do they do that? They lay off workers. So mass layoffs becomes integral to the way stock buybacks and leverage buyouts work. It becomes integral to how billionaires on Wall Street become billionaires. And this is now baked into our system. People hardly even recognize the connection. And it's destroying, it's going to destroy democracy if this keeps going on, because people are not going to put up with indefinite, more and more mass layoffs. They're going to revolt. They're going to go with somebody who's going to give them some form of economic stability.
So have you done research on the percentage of voters that want to increase taxes on the top earners?
I have not looked at that as much. My focus has been on injecting into the political debate mass layoffs. You know, there have been golden opportunities to jump on this, and the Democrats haven't, and I'm trying to convince them to do it. For example, in the middle of COVID, a pharmaceutical plant in West Virginia, decides it's going to move, unionized plant, going to move to India. So the workers are saying, please, President Biden, use the Defense Production Act and stop this. At least you can temporarily stop it, because it makes generic products that we need in this country. And the workers were extremely well organized and caused a fuss all over the place, and totally ignored. Nothing, zero, nada. Even Bernie Sanders, Our Revolution, his organization was supporting this effort, and Sanders did not get involved. And it's a shame. Our goal with this book is twofold. One is to undermine the deplorables, undermine the notion that you should be viewing white working people as somehow this fascist horde that's coming after us. No, if you want to look at who supporting authoritarianism, look at the slew of lawyers that are around Donald Trump. Up and down, look at the people who are hungry for power. It's not the white working class. They want job stability. So one is to take the burden off of their back so we don't keep blaming them and alienating them. And the second thing is to inject the mass layoffs into the political discussion so that somebody finally does something about it. We don't need these stock buybacks. We don't need these leverage buyouts. They are not productive. I just wrote a piece this week on GM after this strike, which they claim was highly costly to them, $9 billion. They just did a $10 billion stock buyback. And I said, this is a present to Elon Musk and Tesla. Instead of investing more in building a competitive car, they only sell 50,000 electric vehicles compared to 1.3 million for Tesla. They decide to put the money in their own pocket. This has got to stop.
Why basic, though, to the whole thing is greed. When did the country turn to love money so much?
It's so interesting that you bring that up because in every workshop we do, we ask people what changed around 1980. And they said greed. And we kept saying, well, how was that possible? Did someone just throw a switch in human nature and all of a sudden we're all that much more greedy? But in fact, what happened was by removing all these controls, especially on Wall Street and large corporations allowing, you basically open the floodgates to greed, and then they justified it by saying this is good for the economy, that this is the best thing possible for freedom and democracy and prosperity. Well, it took 40 years for us to learn that, guess what, it's not so good for the economy. It actually crashed the economy in 2008 and 2009. And it's not so good for democracy because it turns out, China didn't become democratic as it became capitalistic.
That's so interesting. But what can we do about that?
Well, I think all of us can demand that something be done about job stability, and that that we can outlaw stock buybacks and we can outlaw leverage buyouts, but we have to do more. I think there's a lot to be learned actually from the German co-determination model, where workers and their unions hold half the seats on the board of directors.
How many companies have workers on their boards?
Very few.
Not for many.
And they're in a tiny minority. Right. But in Germany, they hold enough seats that the tiebreaker goes to the chairman of the board. We have a chapter in the book that utterly blew my mind when I came across this. It turns out that Siemens Energy announced layoffs of 7,000 people across the world, about 1,700 in the U.S. And Bernie Sanders had campaigned against these kinds of shutdowns at Siemens. And they announced it anyway. And a plant went down in Olean, New York, in Schumer's state, Chuck Schumer's state. We connected ourselves with a German union representative who works with Siemens. And we interviewed and we said, what's going on with Siemens? How are you handling the layoffs there? And we thought, he'd say, well, we have programs for retraining, this, that. And he goes, no, here's what we did. Because we were on the board, we were able to investigate this for almost 2 years. And we had experts come in, et cetera, et cetera. And we pressed so hard that Siemens agreed to keep all 6 plants open and only do layoffs non-compulsory. People could
take
they'd have to buy early retirement, buyouts, et cetera. And by stalling for 2 years, there were people who got closer to retirement. And they didn't do that here, and they did it there. The same company. The workers there didn't get compulsory layoffs, the workers here did. So how did the Biden administration and Schumer react to this? Well, Schumer ran around trying to find other buyers for the plant, et cetera, but he didn't try to stop them. Siemens gets $750 million out of the defense budget. So, there's pressure you could place on them. You know what they did instead? they invited the head of Siemens Energy USA to the signing ceremony for the infrastructure bill. And she said how wonderful that was going to be for jobs in the future. You can't make this up. Now, if I'm a Siemens worker, you think I'm going to ever vote Democratic again?
Right.
I mean, this is
It's
sad.
so interesting. So, you know, we've come to the end of this program, and I haven't even started with some of the questions I have to ask. So I guess you're going to have to come back when the book is actually published, right?
Let me say one thing, yes.
Right.
But people can help right now. If they pre-order the book, especially on Amazon, it leads to more book sales by a factor of 10 to 1. And we're using that money, by the way, to provide stipends for Amazonians United workers to come to our political economy classes.
So you're not making any money by
No.
writing this book.
It all goes
It's
to
the Labor
Labor.
Institute.
Yeah, no,
People should understand that.
And I
right?
don't, the advance and all the royalties and my Substack money and whatever all goes to,
Right.
to these programs.
So please, viewers, mull over it and place your order. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.